welcome. I'd like to welcome you all to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. And welcome to all of, oh, does this help? Yes. Okay, cool. Welcome to all of you who are joining us right here in the fellowship. Welcome to everyone who's joining us on Zoom this morning. And welcome to anyone who chooses to come see us on YouTube afterwards. It's great to have you no matter what. This morning we have music played by the lovely Carly Shell. Thank you so much. And we have technology by Rick Dusky. And he did yeoman's work trying to get everything to go back up because it was down because it's finicky, I guess. Technology is always finicky. That's what I find anyhow. For over 50 years, the UUFP has been a liberal religious voice in the Pottstown area. As UUs, we believe that you can have faith and you can have facts and you can have them both at the same time. We believe that we can honor the wisdom of the past and still explore in the future. We believe that it's important to honor the past, not only by remembering the traditions and remembering the ancestors, but also by learning the lessons of the past so that we don't repeat it. But most importantly, we believe that everyone is inside our circle of love and compassion. So no matter where you are, no matter who you are, no matter where you came from today, we are so happy that you came to be with us. We come to church on Sunday mornings, not because we share a creed, but because we share a promise. We promise one another that we will love and support each other on our spiritual journeys. So, oh, I already said that. Sorry, I'm still suffering from time change. I don't know about you guys. It's like the whole country gets jet lagged on the same day. Someone decided that was a great idea. Jet lag. So now we have time for announcements. If anyone has an announcement, please come on up. Feel free to use one of the microphones and feel free to introduce yourself just in case not everybody knows your name.
Good morning, I'm John, Chair of the Facilities and Grounds. In violation of the seventh principle, I have to cut the tree down in front of the fellowship. The tree and the building don't get along very well, and unfortunately it's getting too big. So. Unless I hear some violent objections, next time you come, you may not see that big tree in front.
Thanks for letting us know.
Well, the alternative is to take the building down.
Hi, I'm Laurie. I think you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to talk about these little dolls. Health Partners International of Canada collects these handmade dolls. They're not to be bought or sold, but they're to be distributed around the world to children who live in traumatic situations, war-torn countries, poverty-stricken countries, and they also help with the trauma that the doctors who distribute them and the soldiers who distribute them have as well. So we're knitting today. Anybody who wants to join our circle, we're going to knit after the potluck, and feel free to join us no matter what your skill level, if you're interested in helping to make these. And by the way, we just mailed, we've mailed 25 altogether to them as of Friday. So hopefully we'll get to 1,000.
Hi, I'm Linda Kazitsky. For those of you who don't know, I'm currently president of the board here at the fellowship. And actually I've got 3 announcements. The first of which is our nursery attendant resigned. So we are now looking for somebody to manage the nursery. If anybody knows of anyone, again, it is a paid position. And please, we're looking for people, ideas, thoughts, suggestions. Okay. Second, the board met yesterday for our board retreat with 2 goals in mind. The first of which was to discuss the survey results and then to look at what the survey said and what were some action items as we think about the upcoming fiscal year. I did want to share a top-line overview very quickly in announcements, results from the survey and how that impacts where we're going to go as we move forward. But I want to say now, I will stay after the service if anybody has additional feedback, comments, willing to listen. Overall, and again, whenever you do surveys like this, you need to step back, even though it's made up of individuals. We are looking at the community as a whole, right? So we're looking at trends, at threads, what are some themes. Overall, as the 5 questions that we asked, people were very satisfied or very much in agreement. But that's not to say there weren't some people who did not strongly disagree with some of the things. So while overall we feel the health of the community is good, we realize there are some situations. We only had 25 people respond, which there are some other people who may have additional thoughts to share. Really want to hear them. In terms of the themes we took away, and thank you to the people who wrote comments. It's one thing to have a point of view, but to actually make suggestions. So the themes that we picked up out of this, I think were really pretty cool. There was very much a strong desire to have more alignment to the UU principles and the UUA, what's going on in the UUA. So you're going to see, actually, please come next Sunday. I will be talking about the changes to Article 2, and that is going to have significant impact if passed regarding what it means to be a UU. So please, attend. There was a theme that there was more appreciation desired. I try to do my best in my monthly column to thank people, but there's obviously better ways to do that, and we're going to be looking at that. We realize that the community as a whole is made up of individuals, and even though we are a welcoming committee, there are gaps within the individuals and its members and our members. And what we were able to identify is there is an opportunity to build bridges, to make this a much tighter community, so that all of us come with our different aspects and regards. How do we make those linkages? Okay? And there was also a desire to have more community projects, which, again, we will take that. I will write this up again. Like I said, I'll stay afterwards. Anybody wants to talk about it? Absolutely, I'm here for it. I will also put the summary into my president's column this month so you can look at it. We're always looking for feedback. And the final announcement that kind of comes out of this, one of the questions was, I have faith in the leadership. There were a small minority, but there were people who strongly disagreed in terms of the faith in the leadership of the fellowship. I look at that as an opportunity, because what I'm going to say is, be the change you want to see. For the past couple years, I have stood up here, I have put in the sojourner. Who wants to be on the board? Who wants to be part of the leadership? Our bylaws say we need to turn leadership over. It's for the health of the community. Unfortunately, we haven't had the volunteers and people willing to do that. I would love, I know Miranda's looking to step down. I would love to have somebody else, take on the role as president. And it's for the health. So my final announcement is, anybody wants to serve on the board, please consider it. Talk to me about what it entails. We would love to have you. All right? Thank you.
Well, that went really well. All right, and now Sybil is going to help us by lighting the chalice this morning. So we're lighting our chalice this morning with words from Salvador Cardinal Baquero. I am not actually going to read those words. They're the words to the hymn 1004 in our teal hymnal. They're also the song that Carly played as a prelude, like the first prelude and the second prelude. The words themselves are in Spanish, but there's an English translation by Ted Wormbrand and Jacqueline Schwartz-Turchik that goes like this. Examine that heart of yours as you look for the love on your high shelf. past the pleasure and passion for your own self, for the love that's reaching to someone else. Your heart's a chameleon, ever open to change, like any flower spread out for the sun, petals bursting with power to be the love that's reaching someone else. Seek out the love in you and find the joy that comes to those who care. Seek out the love in you. It grows wherever it is shared. So we're lighting our chalice this morning in celebration of the love we find when we reach out to others. Thank you so much, Sybil. That was great. And now we come to the time for our chime. So that same technology that helps bring us together across all the parts of the world that YouTube reaches, it also can distract us when we're all sitting here and now together. If you haven't yet done it, please take a second here to silence your phones so that we can be in community together. All right. Now if you sit down, maybe take a nice comfortable seat and really feel the weight of your body into the chair. Feel the weight of your feet as they press into the floor, or as they hang above sometimes. Listen to the rustling, the noises you can hear, the breathing of the people around you. I can hear the air conditioning. All those noises that mean that the building is alive with life and with people. Take a nice deep breath in. And listen to the chime together. God bless you. So our opening words this morning are by Katie Kandarian Morris. She writes, "Spirit of life, spirit of love, spirit of generosity. As we draw near to that quiet, essential side of ourselves, may we open enough to consider the sacred choices we make each minute, each hour, and each day that add up to a lifetime. Let us become aware that here is the place to be forgiven and to forgive ourselves for any past thoughts and actions. Here is a place to begin again in love. And as we are forgiven, let us open our hearts to forgive others and pray for them for well-being and joy, that they be lifted from worry and burden into peace and abundance. May we all be blessed with the riches of the Spirit and moment upon moment of peace and surrender. So may it be." And an antithesis of peace and serenity, we're going to start with hymn number 407. We're going to sing the welcome table. That's like a really fun, it's not quite a zipper hymn, but it feels like a zipper hymn, you know, where you just like zip in one particular set of words. But feel free to clap along if you're moved.
These
Like, I know I make class in the morning, it's like, hi. It's still early. All right, so now it's time for a story. Whether you're young in body or in spirit, you're welcome to join us at the front of the sanctuary and listen to this night's story.
A nice classic for us today. So we are reading Stone Soup. Three monks, Hawk, Lock, and Sue, traveled along the mountain road. They talked about cat whiskers, the color of the sun, and giving. What makes one happy, Sue? Asked Hawk, the youngest monk. Old Sue, who was the wisest, said, let's find out. The sound of the bell brought their gaze to the rooftops of a village below. They could not see from so high above that the village had been through some many hard times. Famine, floods, and war had made the village weary and untrusting of strangers. They'd even become suspicious of their neighbors. The villagers worked hard, but for themselves. There was a farmer, a tea merchant, a scholar, a seamstress, a doctor, a carpenter, and many others. But they had little to do with one another. When the monks reached the foot of the mountain, the villagers disappeared into their houses. No one came to the gates to greet them. And when the people saw them enter the village, they closed their windows tight. The monks knocked on the door of the first house. There was no answer. Then the house went dark. They knocked on the second door, and the same thing happened. It happened again and again, from one house to the next. These people do not know happiness, they all agreed. But today, said Sue, his face bright as the moon, we will show them how to make stone soup. They gathered twigs and branches and made a fire. They placed a small tin pot on top and filled it with water from the village well. A brave little girl who had been watching came to them. What are you doing? She asked. We're gathering twigs, said Locke. We're making a fire, said Hawk. We're making stone soup, and we need 3 round, smooth stones, said Sue. The little girl helped the monks look around the courtyard until they found just the right ones. They put them in the water to cook. These stones will make an excellent soup, said Sue. But this is a very small pot. It won't make much, I'm afraid. My mother has a bigger pot, said the girl. The little girl ran home. She started to take the pot as her mother asked what she was doing. 3 strangers are making soup from stones, she said. They need our biggest pot. Said the girl's mother. Stones are easy to come by. I'd like to learn how to do that. The monks poked the coals and smoke drifted up. The neighbors peered out from their windows. The fire and the large pot in the middle of the village was a true curiosity. One by one, the people of the village came out just to see what the soup was. Of course, old-style stone soup, tongue twister. Old-style stone soup should be well seasoned with salt and pepper, said Hawk. That is true, said Locke, as he stirred the giant pot filled with water and stones, but we have none. I have some salt and pepper, said the scholar, his eyes big with curiosity. He disappeared and came back with salt and pepper and a few other spices. Sue took a taste. The last time we had stone soup of this size and color, carrots made the broth very sweet. Carrots, said a woman from the back. I have a few carrots, but just a few. And then she ran off. She returned with many carrots, as many as she could carry, and dropped them into the pot. Do you think it would be better with onions? Asked Hawk. Oh, yes, maybe an onion would taste good, said the farmer. And he hurried off. He returned in a moment with 5 big onions, and he dropped them into the bubbling soup. "Now that's a fine soup," he said. The villagers all nodded their heads, and the smell was very agreeable. "But if we only had some mushrooms," said Sue, rubbing his chin. Several villagers licked their lips. A few dashed away and returned with fresh mushrooms, noodles, pea pods, and cabbages. Something magical began to happen among the villagers. As each person opened their heart to give, the next person gave even more. And as this happened, the soup grew richer and smelled more delicious. "I imagine the emperor would suggest we add some dumplings," said one villager. "And bean curd," said another. "What about cloud ear and mung beans and yams?" cried some other villagers. "And taro root and winter melon and baby corn," cried some other villagers. "Garlic, ginger root, soy sauce, lily buds." I have some," the people cried out, and off they ran without worry and returning with all they could carry. The monks stirred the pot and bubbled. How good it smelled! How good it would taste! How giving these villagers had become. At last the soup was ready. The villagers gathered together. They brought rice and steamed buns. They brought lychee nuts and sweet cakes. They brought tea to drink and lit the lanterns. Everyone sat down to eat. They had not been together for a feast like this as long as anyone could remember. After the banquet, they told stories, sang songs, and celebrated long into the night. Then they unlocked their doors and took the monks into their homes and gave them a very comfortable places to sleep. In the gentle spring morning, everyone gathered together near the willows to say farewell. "Thank you for having us as your guests," said the monks. "You have been most generous." "Thank you," said the villagers. "With the gifts you have given, we will always have plenty. You have shown us that sharing makes us all richer." "And to think," said the monks, "to be happy is as simple as making stone soup."
Stone soup smells really good right now. So Thomas Rhodes has some words for the offering. He says, "Each week we take up an offering for the support of this congregation and often for the support of others who are working for a better world. To be honest, we need your support, especially in today's economy. But there's another truth here as well, a truth that says, sometimes we need to make an offering. Some of us need to make an offering not only because the congregation needs our support, but because we need to remind ourselves of our own generosity. Because the act of giving something away is a tangible way of acknowledging the gifts that we ourselves have been given. If we don't have enough for ourselves, we may be poor in material wealth, but when we don't have enough to share, we are truly poor in spirit. And none of us should leave this place feeling poor in spirit." I agree. by Elena Kanar. That was last week, or last time I was up here. This is actually going to come from Robert Fulgen. All I learned from kindergarten, except that this is his second book. It was in fire when I lay down on it. So he writes, somewhere out there in the world is a young woman who, if she reads the letter that follows, will sing out, hey wait, that's me, that's my story. This letter is written out of gratitude from me and all of those who have heard her story from me. Out of one person's moment of cosmic despair has come perspective for all. Dear fellow pilgrim, there you were, Hong Kong Airport, end of summer of 1984, tensely occupying a chair next to mine. Everything about you said, young American traveler going home. You had by then exchanged jeans and t-shirt for sarong and sandals. Sensible short hair had given way to hair long and loose. The backpack beside you bore scars of dirt of some hard traveling, and it bulged with mysterious souvenirs of seeing the world. Lucky kid, I thought. When the tears began to drip from your chin, I imagined some lost love or sorrow of giving up adventure for college classes. But when you began to sob, you drew me into your sadness. Guess you had been very alone and very brave for some time. A good cry was in order, and weep you did, all over me. A monsoon of grievous angst. My handkerchief and your handkerchief and most of a box of tissues before both of your sleeves were needed to dry up the flood before you finally gave out. Indeed, you were not quite ready to go home. You wanted to go further on, but you had run out of money, and so here you were, having spent 2 days waiting in the airport on standby with little to eat and too much pride to beg. And your plane was about to go, and you had lost your ticket. You cried all over me again. You had been sitting in this one spot for 3 hours, sinking into the cold sea of despair like some torpedoed freighter. At moments you thought you would just sit there until you died. Well, after we dried you off, I and a nice older couple from Chicago, who were also swept away at the tide of your tears, offered to take you to lunch and to talk to the powers that be at the airlines about some kind of remedy. You stood up to go with us and turned around to pick up your belongings and screamed, and I thought you had been shot. But no, it was your ticket. You found your ticket. You've been sitting on your ticket for 3 hours. Like a sinner saved from the very jaws of hell, you laughed and cried and hugged us and were suddenly gone, off to catch a plane for home and whatever was next, leaving most of the passenger lounge deliriously limp from being part of your drama. I've told this story countless times, he writes. She was sitting on her own ticket, I conclude, and the listeners always laugh in painful self-recognition. Often when I have been sitting on my own ticket in some way, sitting on whatever it is I have that will get me up and on to whatever goes next, I think of you and grin at both of us and get myself moving. So thanks. You have become in a special way my travel agent. May you find all your tickets and arrive wherever it is you want to go. Now, so our hymn this morning is number 315, This Old World. So, My Little Pony. What, again, My Little Pony? Did we do that? Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna be on this for a while. So first, the recap. This is My Little Pony Generosity. But first, the recap for anyone who's new to the series. So if this were a TV show, I would say previously on My Little Pony, and then I'd have like a montage of all the things that happened in the last couple sermons. But it's not, so we have to make do because we need retelling. So My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, for those of you who did not have children who watched it obsessively for like years on end. And also I have to admit, I watched it obsessively for years on end too. It's not like I was not present. It's a cartoon series that ran from 2010 to 2020, so for about a decade. And it featured an ensemble cast of mostly female characters. The creator, Lauren Faust, wanted to make a cartoon that wasn't talking down to girls and wasn't stereotyping them. And that reminded everyone, as she said in the 2019 documentary, A Decade of Pony, that you can love people who are different from you, and that even when you argue with someone, you can still love them. We don't need to think alike to love alike, that's how we'd say it here. Now, all of the main 6 ponies have different interests. And this week's character is Rarity. Rarity is a very traditionally feminine character. She has the wonderful manners of a 1950s debutante and the enunciation to match. She cares a lot about her appearance. She gets her hooves done. Her mane always looks fantastic. From a compilation of questions published on Equestria Daily, Lauren Faust saw Audrey Hepburn as an influence on her creation of Rarity. And in creating the character, Faust wanted to make it clear that Rarity was considered a very beautiful pony. And this was a little bit tough because the animation was meant to support, it was literally meant to support the line of toys. And they couldn't make different body types or facial structures for the toys because logistically, that is very difficult for a toy company to do. So they had to try to come up with subtle ways to make it very clear that she's very, very beautiful. So Faust tried to establish this beauty by creating very specific mane and tail styles, very flowing, and it looks very well kept, very shiny, and also a specific eye shape that's only shared by like 2 background characters and her. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. And also, she wears false eyelashes on occasion, which that's a thing. I'm like, wow, they put that into a cartoon. But like there was one where her false eyelashes were falling off and she's trying to hide it with her mane. But the other thing that she did was she established that Rarity is considered very beautiful using the behavior of the characters around her. So, for example, the dragon Spike, who is kind of like a little brother, kind of like a sidekick, he has a crush on Rarity. And when Rarity travels, all of the characters like fall over themselves to do nice things for her. And so like, she'll have a cab driver like immediately stop as soon as she raises her paw or her hoof. So the side characters that interact with her appear to be struck dumb by her appearance. Rarity prefers that everything be neat, clean, and if possible, fabulous. And in a series about girl power, we're thinking, wait, but why would you include a character that seems to play to all the tropes of the token girl? Like, Faust found that particular token girl thing very unappealing. Why would she do that? Well, and also from the way that she's depicted, we could assume that Rarity would have a lot in common with, say, Regina George from Mean Girl. Does everybody get that one? Yeah, okay. Cool. For example, in the episode Diamond Dogs, where Rarity gets kidnapped because she's a pony who can find gems, she gets kidnapped by these, like, they're kind of like dogs, and they're kind of like prairie dogs, and they live underground, and they expect her to search for gems for them, because that's one of her magic powers. She can find gems very easily. And instead of her being their, like, pony to find things for us, she ends up being like, no, you have to go do that for me. Sorry. No, that's not clean enough. I'll do it when it's clean, darling. So she takes over the operation to the point where they're happy to give her back. Take her. So when you look more closely, Rarity's not just a generic girl. She has a very distinct personality, and she has strengths and she has flaws. She is very creative. She runs her own business where she designs clothes. And she's a business pony, so she's actually like making a living designing clothes. She's not like flighty. One of her flaws, well, I consider it a flaw, maybe other people would disagree. She considers camping to be, a hotel with no room service. She likes to have things just so. And so there was one episode where she spent an entire episode perfecting this one nest for winter wrap up. Winter wrap up is where the ponies change seasons, because in this particular world, the ponies have to physically change things in order for the seasons to change. At which point, why would anyone pick like mud season or like cold? But I digress. She spent the entire episode making one perfect bird's nest. And she needed to make like a whole production line of good enough nests. And she made one that was. She has strong opinions. She's not afraid to share them. She's caring, creative. She's a loving sister. And she represents generosity. So there's a lot of episodes where she displays generosity, but there's one particular episode that I wanted to point out. It's called Rarity Takes Manhattan. Yes, Manhattan. Everything. It's Ponyville, it's Manhattan, it's Canterlot. But this is a Rarity-centered episode where Rarity's in this fashion design contest, and she has created this entire lovely design of clothes for this contest, and it requires this very special, specific fabric. And one of her competitors is like, oh, my designs just need a little something in order to zhuzh them up. And she says, oh, here, I use this fabric, and you could just use some of that as an accent. I'll give some to you right now. And so she gets to the contest and she realizes that this person who she gave this fabric to just went and copied all her designs using the same fabric. And so she goes back to her hotel and she makes this whole new thing out of curtains, just like she's Maria von Trapp. And her friends who are not fashionistas are all helping her so frantically overnight so that she can get into this contest and get everything right. And she gets to the contest and she turns in all of her stuff and she realizes that none of her friends showed up. And she's like, oh, I was so mean to them that they don't even want to support me anymore. Now, of course, that wasn't the case, but she went running back to the hotel and they had checked out of the hotel, and then she goes running back to the theater and they're all there. They're like, oh, we wanted to support you. We just overslept. We were so tired because you kept us up all night sewing. And so it turns out that she won the contest. And the lesson that she learned was that like saying thank you to your friends is really important. And you can be generous with your time as well as other things. Her friends were all generous to her. She was generous and it backfired. But then she also decided to still be generous, even though the one time it backfired. So there was another character who needed an opportunity. And she was like, even though last time I was generous, it was awful, this time I'm going to be generous again. And that time it worked out. So it's a lovely story. And the point of this, I'm sorry, I didn't write the point of this, which I normally do. But Rarity she's the generous character, and that was like where she gets her little generosity cutie. It's not a cutie mark, it's like this generosity gem thing that then turns into something else in the story, etc. But all this to say that when you're looking at a pony who's generous, like when you look at the way that she's described, you would see someone who's got refined manners and thinks about her appearance. Do we think to ourselves, yes, that is someone who's going to be naturally generous? Is that what we kind of come up with? No. We kind of might think, oh, she's very generous. Your planned giving and due consideration of the tax ramifications of each gift. Right? And that's one of the things that I love about My Little Pony. The fact that it matters just as much that each person is seen as an individual. Because yes, she could have been written as this character who just is like the ginger of the group from, thank you. I was about to start singing the song and I was like, nobody is gonna want to hear me do that. So when we think about what a generous person looks like, we're not necessarily thinking of the Rarity type. And not that Rarity is necessarily supposed to be more or less well off than any other pony, because they don't honestly go into the economic situations of the ponies. It's a kids' show. But it makes you think, like, who deserves our generosity and why do we make judgments about who is going to give generously? So there is this episode it's actually the very first episode, so it's literally written by Lauren Faust. It's well, actually the second episode, but the first episode is a two-part episode, so it's the second half hour of the first episode. And in this episode, everyone is establishing what their type of gift to the world is. And the way that they establish that Rarity's gift is her generosity is there is this sea monster who is throwing a temper tantrum. And everyone's like, oh no, how are we gonna cross this river? We can't cross this river because the sea monster is making, I don't know why it's a sea monster in the river, but anyhow, it's a sea monster and it's making the water so rough that we can't get to the castle of the two sisters and we'll never be able to grab the elements of harmony. And so Rarity goes up to the sea monster and says, oh my goodness, your mustache is so uneven. Let me help you with that. And she snips off part of her tail and puts it on so that his mustache is even again. And you're thinking, okay, well, that's like the kind of thing that goes into a kid's show, right? I mean, the sea monster was causing problems because he had a partial mustache. Would I take that seriously as a measure? But Rarity did. Rarity could put herself in that sea monster's place and think, oh my goodness, like, how would I feel if suddenly I was used to looking one way and I don't anymore? And when I first watched that episode, I laughed just like we all did. But how many of you know someone who's donated to lots of love? Or how many of you know someone who's lost hair because of a medical treatment? I remember when my mom was having brain surgery, how carefully she was considering how she was going to cover her head after the surgery was done. And she had different things. She had like a wig that was kind of like her original hair, and then she had turbans. And how many of you have cried over a bad haircut? Like I remember I tell my kids to brush their hair all the time, and I know that anyone who's a parent has probably told their kids you gotta brush your hair. But the reason I tell my kids, or like the story that I always back that up with, is when I was in 7th grade, I had to have my hair cut this short because I did not brush it well enough. I was brushing the outside and not the inside because I was not using the appropriate length of brush. Like you have to have, for my type of hair, you have to have like a really long time brush to get all the way through. And they had to shave the back of my head and cut the rest of it really short. And that was traumatic. 35 years later, I still use that as the story of brush your hair. So, you know, Stephen being upset about his mustache, it doesn't feel so trivial anymore when I think about it that way. Cutting my hair made me feel ugly and unlovable. And maybe cutting his mustache made him feel that way. And you know, Stephen Magnet is the name of that sea monster. He even pays this forward. There's an episode called Slice of Life, which does not contain any of the main six. It only contains background characters. And two of the side characters are getting married. It's Cranky Doodle Donkey and his new wife to be, Matilda. They're getting married. And Stephen Magnet, the sea monster, is the best man. And Cranky Doodle is like really upset because he can't find his toupee right before the ceremony. And what does Stephen do? He cuts off part of his mustache and gives it to Cranky Doodle Donkey so that he can have lovely, luxurious hair for the wedding. Generosity inspires more generosity. So with that story, I think it kind of makes sense that we link generosity to our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And you know, generosity is really good for us. It's not just that it feels like the right thing to do, it lights up the right parts of our brain. Christopher Berglund wrote for Psychology Today in 2017 about a study that the University of Zurich Department of Economics psychology study? Yes, because it was about giving. And one of the things that economists are really interested in is altruism and giving and philanthropy, like what inspires big amounts of philanthropy. So they did a study into what degree of generosity is necessary in order to produce those benefits to your happiness and your mood. And they did this study, it had two groups of people. Sorry, I just went too far. So one group was instructed to be generous during the game and to accept slightly higher costs in this game that they were playing in order to be generous and in order to benefit other people. And the other group was instructed to prioritize themselves and just try to win the game. And unsurprisingly, as the game progressed, the participants who behaved generously, even if it was in small ways, displayed activity in the brain areas that are associated with pro-social behavior, such as the temporal parietal junction, and the areas associated with reward, such as the orbital frontal cortex. The participants who were not instructed to behave with generosity, they didn't light up in the same way. I mean, there would be some in the reward center, but the pro-social center, not so much. And the way that the researchers described this was having a warm glow. And also, this is quoted directly out of the article. This is something I found really interesting. The researchers also found that simply making a verbal commitment to behave more generously in the future activates those altruistic areas of the brain and intensifies that warm glow within brain areas associated with positive emotions. Just thinking about being generous, not even actually making it to the being generous part, but just thinking about your generosity is good for you. Tobler commented on this aspect of the study and said, it's remarkable that intent alone generates a neural change before the action is actually implemented. So I have a lot more things here, but I just checked the time and I'm not going to keep you over for once. But I wanted to link generosity with inherent worth and dignity because we're likely to give when things are close to home. So I looked around for this particular study and I couldn't find it, but there was a study that said including an impact story is much more powerful in eliciting donations than statistics. And that makes sense. It's not a surprise. Like when you listen to the news about the Texas wildfires that are going on right now and here, like 85,000 acres, 850,000 acres have burned in Hutchinson County alone. Over 200 families have been like displaced. I mean, that's a tragedy, and you can tell it's a tragedy. But when you are listening to a story and you hear directly from a farmer who's out there trying to save his remaining cattle and trying to get the donated like grain and the donated hay out to where the cattle are, that really hits home, and that makes it that much closer to your heart. When you hear about a conflict overseas, like Ukraine or Gaza, it sounds awful. But when you hear about a single family that's trying to relocate their members in advance of the bombing, or trying to recover from a terrible, terrible trauma, or like this story I heard in Ukraine with this little kid who's so happy that he gets to go to school twice a week in a subway tunnel. Those stories, those are the stories that bring the need closer, even though the families that are afflicted are miles away. But you know, the truth is that we don't need to travel hundreds of miles in order to find families who need our generosity. There was a speaker at my work this Wednesday. He was talking about volunteering, and he's actually on the board at Bridle Park, which, if I'm not mistaken, is where some of our previous ministers lived. I could be wrong though. Bridle Park's Bridle Waters. Does that sound right to anybody else? No? Okay. But he talked about seeing a problem and thinking someone else would do it. Like, this is why he started volunteering. He saw a problem, he thought someone else would do something about it. And then like the next week it was still there. And he's like, well, I guess I'm gonna be the one to do something about it. I'm somebody. It reminds me of that public service announcement that ran when I was a kid. I don't know if any of you are gonna remember this one. I've mentioned it before actually, so maybe you remember it from that. There's this group of girls standing in the girls' bathroom, and there's water, and the water's running in one of the taps. And then one girl points at it and says, oh my goodness, somebody should shut that off. And then there's another girl that says, oh my goodness, that is such a big waste. What a waste of water. I'm posting it on social media. And then someone else talked about, everyone should be concerned. Don't we know there's a drought in California? And then there's this cacophony of people who are all commenting on how terrible it is that this water is still running. And then this other girl comes out of the stall, washes her hands, turns off the water, and walks out. You're like, oh, total silence. And you know, sometimes you can be the person who turns off the tap. But, you know, awesome. But sometimes you can't be the one who can turn off that tap. Sometimes you can't be the one to offer your mustache or a little bit of your special fabric. But we do all have something to give. So you may have wondered what that story, this story, with the girl in the airport has to do with generosity. Because it doesn't really sound like a story about generosity. It sounds like maybe a story about giving out of your own way, or a story about actually checking your resources, a story about moving ahead and trusting the universe. But I see this as a story about generosity. Because what he did was he saw a stranger in trouble, and instead of ignoring it or just letting it go or letting it be someone else's problem, he listened and he was willing to help. He was willing to be the one to turn off that tap. And it turns out that she didn't need somebody to step in and like buy a new ticket, but he was willing to listen. Sometimes we don't have to have things in order to do things. Like sometimes just our presence is enough. Sometimes that gift that we need to give, that gift we are best able to give, is our time. So we can go out and give generously. We can live generously. We can do what Rarity does, and even if sometimes it bites us, keep giving because it's worthwhile. Because we can be the ones who are the change we want to see. There we have it. All right, so this last hymn is Standing on the Side of Love. It's 1014 in teal hymnal. And this one is another one where you're like, what do these have to do with generosity? But in my worldview, generosity and love are kind of the same thing. When you love somebody, you're willing to go out and do what needs to be done to support them. So standing on the side of love. is the time for. So our closing words today are from James Morrison. Within each of our hearts, oh, did I skip something? I sure did. Let's turn off the chalice. So please join me in reading our chalice extinguishing word. Extinguish this chalice flame, but not the light of its the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. Lead you together in our hearts, and in our hands. Right, and now James Morrison. Within each of our hearts, there is a most glorious light. Go forth and let its spark help you understand what troubles both you and others. Go forth and let its light of reason be guiding your decisions. Go forth and bring its ray of hope to those in need of help, both in body and spirit, that they may find healing. Go forth and fan the flames of passion to help heal our world. Go forth and spread the warm glow of love, pushing back the darkness in the world. Go forth and share your glorious light, the world. So may it be.